How's it going, metalheads, and welcome back to another video. This is the second installment in my discography ranking series. If you missed the last one, I ranked the Life Cycles EPs, who are a crossover thrash band. In this one, we're going to be going in a slightly different musical direction. I will be ranking the albums from Swedish death metal band Aeon. So yeah, let's get started. Aeon are a death metal band from Östersund, Sweden, formed in 1999. Sorry if I pronounced your town name wrong. I am not from Sweden, so yeah, do with that what you will. But anyway, today they have released 5 albums, and I'll be ranking those in this video. So let's get started. After making some noise in the underground with some smaller releases, including an EP, Aeon would emerge in 2005 with their debut album, Bleeding the False. This album reminds me a lot of early Deicide. Lots of the songs are very anti-Christian, and the mix on this album is very stripped down. And that's one of my biggest complaints with this album, is that the guitars have very little heft to them. They're used more as extra percussion for me, especially when they're doing the chugs during the verses and choruses. The leads cut through, but other than that, all I hear is a lot of drums and vocals. That's ultimately why this album ranks lower, because I think if the guitars were chunkier and more prominent in the mix, it would make this album a lot better. That and the fact that Deicide already took all the satanic song titles, the good ones at least, because there's one on this album called God Gives Head in Heaven, which I think is not the best song title. I can't decide whether to laugh at that or facepalm. Just not my thing. The fact that the guitars are almost more percussion on this album makes these songs very repetitive as well, especially with the band's tendency to chug all the time. And don't get me wrong, I love chuggy death metal, but when you can't hear the guitars very well, it gets lost, and they all sound very similar to me. The more polished, stripped-down mix of this album works better for tech death, in my opinion, where there's a lot more on the higher strings, and you can hear it when it cuts through the mix really well. But if it's all chugs, it gets really repetitive and monotonous for me. The only thing to break up the monotony is the 7th track, Enchanter, which is just a full track of creepy atmospheric samples. All in all, not a horrible album, but they've definitely done better, and it's a solid debut. But this ranks number 5 out of their albums for me. Moving on, they would return 2 years later in 2007 with their sophomore effort, Rise to Dominate. This album would see a fresh face on bass as founding bassist Johan Helm, I don't know how you're saying your name, I'm sorry, would depart before recording. So this would see the band also move from Unique Leader Records over to the mighty Metal Blade Records, where they remain to this day. Immediately, the album starts off better for me than the last one, with more vocal range and way more interesting guitar parts. Instead of constant chugs, they switch it up, throwing in some pinch harmonics and stuff on the higher string, which is what the last album was desperately lacking. This mix is much more favorable on this album too. To me, it feels like much more effort was put into the songwriting, more riff variety, more technical leads and solos, and even different patterns and tempo changes. To me, this feels like a band coming to their own and developing their own sound. Even the song titles improved on this one, I feel, with them getting their messages across way more effectively. I don't have a problem with, metal that, leans towards Satanism and stuff like that. Especially the song titles. Obviously, I love Deicide. So songs like You Pray to Nothing, Godless, and There Will Be No Heaven for Me emulate a much more refined and mature hatred for Christ, which is something I can get behind a lot more than the ones on the last album. Like I said, there was some more, immature ones on the last album. So on this one, it really feels like they're singing from the heart about something. And, when there's song titles that are more mature and refined like that, you can really tell that they care about it. Whereas the last one kind of felt like they were just doing that to, follow the stereotype of, metal that hates Christianity. But I digress. This is definitely a step up musically. This leans toward more technical, kind of in the Cannibal Corpse range of technicalities, where it's not like all the way tech death, but it for damn sure isn't just chugs anymore. And it's a really solid album. This ranks number 3 for me. Moving on, they would wait 3 years before unleashing their next album, releasing Path of Fire in 2010. It would see Aeon shrink to a 4-piece for the first time in their career, with guitarist Zeb Nilsson and Daniel Delemy sharing bass duties on the album. Sorry if I mispronounced any of your names. This album is still really solid, though, despite, the lack of a permanent bassist. Again, lots more unique patterns and tempo changes, and the vocal range is great, and the drums, again, are awesome. Nice atmospheric acoustic tracks break up the madness with the 5th track, Total, Christus, and Versus, adding a nice touch. It is more where I like my interlude tracks, towards the middle instead of the beginning or end. It adds way more depth to an album, I think, and again gives the ears a nice break, right in the middle. They really found their own style and continued it on this album. The 6th track, Of Fire, has some really nice chorus-like vocal kind of things that accompany the guitars and parts, adding even more nuance and depth to an already awesome album. The vocals up to this point have really reminded me of Glenn Benton. I've talked about Deicide a lot, coupling with these guys. And so coupled with the subject matter that I've talked about, I can confidently state that in my mind, Aeon are the Swedish equivalent of Deicide, which is cool, because if you're looking to fill the gap in Deicide's discography, that's left behind by the contractually obligated albums that aren't as good, definitely give Aeon a listen as they do that for you, because they're awesome. This album is really great and an awesome continuation of their still developing sound. However, it ranks a little bit below the last one at number 4 for me. Moving on, in 2012, Aeon would return with a vengeance, releasing Aeon's Black. They would recruit Marcus Edvardson on bass, returning to their full 5-piece form. This album is an absolute beast. Again, slightly reminiscent of Deicide for me, as this album is brutal as fuck and it absolutely rips. So much chugginess on the guitars, gnarly drums, and the vocals are top-notch. They're the kind of death metal vocals that are killer yet intelligible, so if you like stuff like Deicide or Cannibal Corpse, or you can hear what the vocalist is saying, definitely check out this record specifically. Phenomenal stuff. The voice of the Accuser, the third track, is a little piano instrumental interlude. Normally, I would have liked to seen that a little later in the album, especially on one like this that has 15 tracks. Aeon are really good at putting a lot of tracks on their albums, but with that comes the responsibility of placing your interlude tracks more towards the middle for me, at least. So if it was placed at number 7 or 8, it would provided a nice break for me, like I keep saying. But that's my only complaint with this album. The guitars on here are crunchy as hell, and the mix is amazing. I love this mix the best out of any of their albums. Just a wall of sound, but you can still hear the vocals, the drum, and the bass really well through there, which is the best kind of mix for a death metal album. They throw in pinch harmonics and squeals, along with all the chugs, which is just oh so satisfying. Songs like They Still Pray, I Wish You Death, and Dead Means Dead are absolute bangers. If you like Cannibal Corpse, Deicide, or any of the bands in that vein, you will 100% dig this album, and this is my number 1 Aeon album for that reason. Just an awesome album. Definitely recommend it to anybody who likes those bands that I mentioned. So yeah, let's keep moving. They would take a sizable break after Aeon's Black, waiting 9 years before returning with their 5th and most recent album in 2021, entitled God Ends Here. Lots of lineup changes happened in that time, with them even having to bring in a session drummer for the God Ends Here sessions, Yane Yaloma, something like that. Sorry if I mispronounced your name again. This album begins with an intro track of sorts, with soaring lead guitars and some chorusy type vocals towards the end. That track, The Nihilist, does a good job of starting the album off before going full speed in the next track, Liar's Den. This album really continues where the last one left off, and that's not a bad thing considering how good the last one was. Following an album like that, especially with lineup changes and a 9-year gap, they did a remarkable job with this one. This album has all the technical prowess, the nuances, and the ability of the last few albums. More chorusy vocals in parts add atmosphere, but again, my complaint is the interludes are somewhat too early, and there's a lot of them for some reason. Track 4, entitled Orpheus, Indu, and Furus, is a lot of chorusy vocals and orchestra sounds. I would have ideally placed that track later in the album, especially on a 16-track album. For some reason, track 8, Into the Void, is also an orchestral interlude track, as well as track 15, which is called Overture Magnum Reginae. If I was Aeon, I would have smashed 2 of those together to make a longer track, and then deleted one of them and placed that interlude right in the middle. Like I said, I like my interlude tracks in the middle, and they're only like 30 seconds, so if you just make one a minute long, and you get rid of the other one and put it in the middle, I don't see what the issue with that is, but, I digress. It's not my album. This album is still really solid, and I can look past that if the music is awesome, which this one definitely is. Really awesome technical leads, chuggy riffs, and the vocals remain awesome. The vocalist, he's one of 2 constant members. His name is Tommy Dahlstrom. Remains remarkably consistent throughout all 5 albums. He nails his specific vocal style every time. He sounds like a little like Glenn Benton, like I said, but mostly staying in a higher, raspier, more intelligible register. So yeah, this album's awesome. Tracks like Severed, Church of Horror, and Deny Them Eternity helped this album to become my number 2 Aeon album. So yeah. All in all, Aeon are a really solid band, and I recommend any of their albums, save for the debut. Just you can skip that one. The other ones are way more enjoyable. They seem to be in another period of inactivity as of now, with no current drummer listed for them on Metal Archives. As I said, they brought in a session drummer for the last album. But whatever the case, they're an awesome band, and if you hadn't heard them, I'd definitely go check them out. I hope they release something new soon, because that would be super awesome. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this discography ranking. Let me know what bands I should rank next. I hope you're all doing well. Have a nice day. See ya.